First of all, congratulations.
Thank you, Jake. It's been a great week.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you could be president? Are you ready to make those kinds of decisions? Because that's what the gig really is.
Yeah. That's what it ought to be. You ought to pick somebody for VP who can help you govern, and God forbid, should something happen, could steer the nation. I haven't missed a rung on the ladder, Jake. You know, I've been a city councilman and mayor, and a lieutenant governor and governor, and now a U.S. senator with a foreign policy and armed services expertise.
Your son, Nat, is a Marine. He's deployed. How does his service weigh into how you look at those life or death decisions?
Jake, I'll tell you. I've cast a lot of votes in my life in those positions. There's never a vote that is as meaningful or powerful as when you're casting a war vote. I voted twice in the Senate with respect to supporting the president to use military action against Syria, and then to support military action against ISIL. Those are very different votes than any vote you'll ever cast. But when you got a kid in the military, who and a lot of his friends are in the military, it's even more so. So I have it's rare these days for somebody in Congress to have children in the military. There's only 2 of us in the Senate that do. It's probably about the same on the House side. So I'm very mindful of anything we'll be doing in this new role, giving my opinion to Secretary Clinton and then supporting her as we're making really hard decisions. I got a little of my own blood coursing through the veins of one of the 2 million young men and women who serve this country, and that adds an extra kind of sense of gravity and frankly, gray hair.
Let's talk about some of the politics. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but there were protesters during Hillary Clinton's speech. They were worried about protesters heckling you.
Yeah.
Is there still work that needs to be done to unify the Democratic Party?
Sure there is, but I feel we're in a really, really good shape. You know, I was Democratic Party chair, so I'm used to the fact that we are a big family with a lot of different points of view. I think Bernie did a good job this week by telling his folks why Hillary was right and why Donald Trump is directly contrary to every value that he's ever held or advocated in his life.
Hillary Clinton and you have another challenge in how many Americans perceive her in terms of her honesty, in terms of how trustworthy she is. Can you help with that, do you think?
I think I can, because look, I can brag about her more than she's going to brag about herself. I mean, Hillary is I call her kind of Midwestern Methodist church kid. You heard President Obama the other night talk about the Midwestern thing, and I'm from the Midwest. We don't like to talk about ourselves much. That's not her natural way, and frankly, it ain't mine either, but I love to brag on other people. And so I talk about Hillary. When people ask a question like that, I say, look, if you want to know the character of somebody in public life, what you do is you look to see, did they have a passion that was obvious before they got in public life? And have they maintained that passion all throughout their career, hell or high water, good or bad, victories or defeats? Hillary's got that passion from a teenager, the empowerment of families and children. And I said the other night at the convention, and Trump's got a passion too, but his passion has been himself. Is it kids and families first, or is it me first? I think Hillary, even though this isn't her natural thing, I think when she told her story last night and walked through the battles that she's been in, I think you could tell that was coming from the heart and soul.
You mentioned Mr. Trump. Mike Bloomberg, who spoke at the convention, and he basically suggested that Donald Trump is not sane. Do you agree?
Mike Bloomberg knows Trump, and I don't. I got to scratch my head all the time. 2 days ago, he did a press conference, and he told everybody what a lousy governor of New Jersey I was.
To be honest, you were.
Yeah, well, I was a no-show governor of New Jersey when I was governor of Virginia. And the fact that, he was a lousy governor of New Jersey, he tried to raise taxes by $4 billion on his first day in office. Okay, look, the guy's new to it, and we're a big country, and there are 50 states, and New Jersey's different than Virginia. I guess you got to let him climb the learning curve. I don't know anything about his sanity. I've never met him. But somebody who would mistake New Jersey for Virginia or Virginia for New Jersey, I mean, I just scratch my head.
He was confusing Tim Kaine with Tom Keene, I think, right?
Tom Keene was governor of New Jersey, and he finished his term 26 years ago.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I was 5 years old then, and I would have been a bad governor. Now, I actually was older than 5, but at age 5, I would have been a bad governor.
One of the things that you talked about in your speech was your faith.
Yep.
You're a Catholic. So I have to ask you about your position on abortion, because when you started your career, you seemed you seemed pro-life. You were anti-abortion. Now you are not, and you have voted the way that Planned Parenthood and NARAL and groups like that would like you to. Robbie Mook, the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, said you have given the campaign assurances that you're with Hillary Clinton when it comes to her position on repealing the Hyde Amendment, which bans federal funding.
That is not accurate. I don't think Robbie has said that, Jake. Here's my voting position on abortion hasn't really changed. I am a Catholic and I accept the church's teaching on this issue, but I do not believe that the job of somebody in public life is to basically say, I'm a Catholic, so my job is to make our laws consistent with Catholic doctrine and make everybody follow it. This is an important personal matter, and I've always supported Roe v. Wade. I think the last thing we need is a government that intrudes upon the decision-making of women and men too when it comes to matters of whether it's abortion rights, contraception,
but you used to have a
intimacy,
different position, right? I mean,
not on this. No, look,
not on Hyde.
Well, on Hyde, my position is the same. I support the Hyde Amendment. I haven't changed that. But as a vice president, I had to get comfortable with the notion that I can have my personal views, but I'm going to support the President of the United States, and I will.
What's been the most surprising part of this storm that you're
Wow.
in? Your life is very, very different than it was a week ago.
Surprising. It's just so much in the last week has just really changed and is different. But, I have a moral compass, and that's not changing. And I have a wonderful and warm family who have been so supportive, and that's not changing. That I am where I am, and that I was able to have my 81-year-old parents and my wife's 90-plus-year-old parents with us this week. It's just been
I gotta ask you,
unforgettable.
what was the reaction of your parents?
My mother last night on stage, history making to nominate the first woman as a president of a major party. My mom on stage with all the balloons falling, she's 81, she says, this is the best night of my life. Now, when mom says that to son, I feel like I know at least for the next 48 or 72 hours I'm going to be in good shape. I'll do something on Monday that'll make her mad. But, it was a very, very powerful moment.
Well,
and I said to Hillary when I walked out into that fantastic evening, I said to her, this is a great country, and you just made it a lot